Starting on page 1, any changes from draft 1.1 to draft 2.1, Eric, that you want to go over with us?
Yes, you mean in the bill anywhere? Right, starting from the beginning, yep. So Eric Fitzpatrick with the Office of Legislative Counsel again, here to walk the committee through. We're now on draft 2.1 of the committee strike all to the miscellaneous judiciary procedure bill. I have removed the highlighting because this is the final version, so I'll point out where the changes are. So the first ones are on page 2, and this is to do with the emergency relief from abuse order proceeding that we talked about. You'll see that online, well, there was that typo that Judge Zoning noted that's corrected, that is online 13. Provided to the applicant. So.
Can I just ask a question on page 2?
Yep.
And this wasn't a change on your last draft either, but I remember why was this on line 12? There was a shall at one point, shall be sworn to. And why did we go to may? I saw that in like the domestic violence report.
Yeah.
Why was that wanted, that it may be sworn to?
The reason for the change from shall to may was that they didn't want it to be a requirement that the victim do this affidavit over the phone during business hours, because victims might want the option to go into court. So rather than have it be a requirement that they do it over the phone, it's a may, so that they could, if they chose to, just keep the existing process of going in to the court in person and doing the affidavit that way.
Okay, so I understand that part, but this does this not imply that it may not be sworn to or affirmed by the administration?
It does.
Seems to double meaning here, if that's what your meaning is.
Well, it says maybe done over the phone.
Yeah, but where's the shall is the part I'm questioning.
Well, it says shall submit an affidavit.
Right.
So in all
May be
cases,
sworn on the phone.
and that affidavit may be sworn over the phone.
Right. Or it may be sworn in person.
Right, which I think is covered in that first part. First clause.
Shall be.
Shall submit, okay. Be sworn to.
If they do it by phone, no, this is what has to happen.
Right.
The plaintiff shall submit. It does look goofy
It
now.
looks goofy, that's you're right. So it should to you.
I think it reads okay to me.
Our grammarian.
Yeah, so plaintiff shall submit an affidavit in support of the order, which may be sworn to or formed over the phone, and shall conclude with.
And you could put and if sworn over the phone shall.
Well,
Oh,
in
no,
either case.
because it's either case
Yeah.
they do it. Yeah, you're right.
I don't think there's any out there for
Yeah.
anybody to not submit an affidavit or to affirm it.
Yeah.
It's just the only conditional thing is whether you use the phone.
Peggy, is that
Yeah.
okay with you? Are we on live?
Yeah, so, yeah,
Wouldn't it have been better
Okay.
to put
we're like,
plaintiff shall submit an affidavit in support of the order either by phone or in person? And then have this
Yeah.
sworn to.
that's fine.
Okay, I think it's fine.
So,
Moving right along.
So you'll see that the language about the wording that has to be in the statement is now cleaned up. That's on line 17 through 18. Remember, in the previous version, did use some language that wasn't consistent with the affidavit itself. So that's now trued up. And there's a new section, which is section 4. This is the after hours section. Remember, so that was the whole reason for adding this section 3 in the first place, was to true it up with what you did a couple of years ago, which is section 4. And that was to do with, you'll see the line 7 and 8. This is procedures for relief after regular court hours or on weekends and holidays. So that was what was done last time. And you'll see, so since you changed the language in this new piece that's being added in the affidavit, the same change is made to that previous statute about after hours, and that's at the bottom of page 3, over onto the top of page 4. about what language has to be actually in use, but that the victim is swearing to. So it's identical to what you just looked at, section 3. Does that make sense? All right. So then you would turn all the way to page 23. And it starts at the bottom, toward the bottom, line 15, this is the fees section, which you had before. I did say fees for service of civil process, and I added and fingerprinting, because we're covering that now as well. And then if you, so this section, I believe, is unchanged, section 35, I mean. But then you move on to section 36 and 37, these are both newly added. So 36, and these are deal with the fingerprinting fees. So remember the decision was to go from 25 to 35, that's over on page 25, line 2. So the existing fee is 25. It's interesting, so as the sheriff mentioned, this language appears identically in 2 different places in the statutes. And Title 36, the one that you just looked at, just generally speaking, applies to fingerprints, and I'm not sure exactly why it's necessary, but there's also a separate provision in section 37 which said the exact same thing.
And there were different,
And
amounts.
different numbers, yeah, that's right.
Weird.
Otherwise, it's word for word the same.
And no, is that, there's a couple words different
Are there?
on line 14 in the second one. It says, as required by this chapter, and it doesn't say that in the other one.
Right.
So they've been charging 25, even though elsewhere it says 15.
Evidently.
No, that probably is inconsistent.
Because it says
Teachers,
25 on
right?
that one and 15 there.
Section 37 was for teachers.
Right. Title 16, you see on line 9, and that's the education title, as opposed to previous section 36, title 20, that's public safety.
Bill will probably have to go to the education committee before it goes to the.
Center campus.
So in both places, the fee goes to 35, in one instance from 25, and the other instance from 15. And effective date is still on path. Those are the only revisions to the previous one.
Are you wanting to get this out, or is this one that you're gonna
I'd
hold on
like
to
to get
for
it
a while?
out, so we can go to finance.
Oh,
If
okay.
there's something we want to add to it, we can do it before it gets to the floor, but I would
Okay.
guess that we voted out today, goes on notice. Tuesday, it'll be referred to finance, and it'll probably take them a week or 2 to get it out.
I would move then. That we adopt draft 2.1, draft 2.1 amendment to H729.
Senator White has moved that we adopt the amendment to H729 as seen in draft 2.1. Is there any further discussion? Okay, Peggy, would you call the roll on the amendment?
Senator Benny,
Yes.
Senator Nika,
Yes.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Bruce,
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes. The report as amended favorably.
Favorably.
Senator White has moved that the report H729 favorably as amended.
Are you ready for the vote?
Yeah.
Senator Benny,
Yes.
Senator Nika,
Yes.
Senator White,
Yes.
Senator Bruce,
Yes.
Senator Sears.
Yes, we're unanimous. Who'd like to report the miscellaneous? No speaking. Okay, the default is the chair. And I'll certainly have fun with this bill.
In my committee, there is no default I assign someone.
Well, this has worked for 30 years, I guess we'll keep doing it.
Yeah. I've got a summary of this one, Senator Sears.
Oh, thank God.
Does this need to go through editing or is
Yes.
this, it does, okay.
But I already said it, so hopefully we'll have it back by this afternoon sometime.
Okay, will you be ready to bring it up to the secretary's office or can we wait till Tuesday?
I'll take it up.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I wondered if that new facility that they're using, that you mentioned, is gonna be, if there's any sort of intersection with that, and because the institutions committee in the House is talking about, remember the report, secure residential report in the juvenile proceedings bill? This just maybe occurred to me, I wondered if that's, now is that gonna be what they can do there, gonna be some of those kind of placements?
Supposed to be.
Yeah.
Huh.
So there are two, I think he's talking about two different ones. One was when he first started thinking about it, it was the kids who are being transported by DCF, not because they're dangerous or anything, but because they have to go to family court. And they sit in hospitals and
Right.
motels and stuff, and that's what he started talking.
Dangerous or in hotels. Those aren't regular kids that are in hotels.
I think that there also were some that they sit in the sheriff's office or whatever and wait for it to be transported to court. Then they have to go back in the car and get transported to family court. And they're not the dangerous kids, and so he suggested that they have some rooms for them there so that they didn't have to. And then because they're gonna have a family courtroom
Right.
in the facility, then they wouldn't have to stick them back in the car. And it started with that, and I think that's what he meant when he said DCF took him to task and said, would you also look at this?
I think he's got regular kids going to court and not transported by the sheriff. These are kids that need a secure transport that go with the sheriff. Like out of the hospital emergency room because they're dangerous or they're charged with something. The regular social workers take them to court. They don't pay for the sheriff to take a regular kid to go to court who has to go as part of regular reviews, not because they've done anything wrong.
No, yeah, and I don't know the difference, but I do know that there was a difference in the two things that he was talking about.
Yeah. Short term, like
Yeah.
those tough kids.
Yeah.
That need to have a place. The others just wait in court.
Well, the short term,
But it's a great idea. I mean,
It's, yeah, you should, why don't you,
I just wanted Tony Newberry is out. I need Sean to say.
I think he's gonna tell you that.
this is short term.
No, just make sure.
oh, yeah, that's
Still
right.
alive.
Still alive.
This short term or long term?
Well, it's,
Still live.
it's short term, and I think that what the commissioner said was, what I caught from what he said was that he was hoping that the experience would be good enough that it would become long-term. That's what I picked up from the
No,
commissioner, but at
I'm
this
talking
point,
about short-term placement or long-term placement for kids. They already have that. What they don't have is a long-term placement for more difficult kids who are, the type that Newberry was designed to take.
Right.
So that's what they're lacking. They do need, crisis beds for kids that CEOL can't handle or Vermont Center for Girls can't handle, but I thought the commissioner said that there'd be one bed was short-term, one, and three would be long-term.
yeah, I think it was the contract with the sheriff that's short-term that he's hoping will maybe become long-term.
Short term is needed too, because people are, that's the motel thing, you have to go overnight
I know,
in a motel.
but I think he's hoping, I thought what the commissioner was saying is that he
Yeah, I know.
hopes, that long-term they'll be able to keep
Yeah.
that there for long-term people. But at the, in the
I
meantime,
know,
the
the
sheriff
committee's out
hasn't
of control,
committed to.
absolutely out of control.
Out of
I want
control.
control of the committee. I want the pro tem to get down here immediately.
We don't, that's
Well,
Allison.
Maybe, yes, we'll get, somebody go get her. Her committee's out of control.
We have to elect her again today.
I wanted to use this opportunity for us is to have a more informal discussion, since it does take into touches on government operations, H546. We are live. We're not doing it in private. Anybody who's listening, if anybody is. This is a a bill where we had a lot of concerns about in this draft that it came from the House. I appreciate that the Government Operations Committee is going to look at it. I believe today, actually.
We are going to hopefully look at it today, then we're gonna look at it more in depth on Tuesday, and we're only looking at the organizational part.
And so we could, I thought it would be a good idea to talk about some of the concerns that were expressed regarding the House version of the bill. One of the concerns was what happened to the Center for Justice Research. I think that's the proper term.
That was Karen.
Yeah.
I have a question also about, in the first page, it says the director may appoint employees as necessary.
Yeah.
And I don't remember that language in any other instance.
And I don't know why you would even have that in there, because on page 11, it does say there's 1 full-time and 2 full-time
Right.
people, so it means the director hires those people, so I don't know why you would have that in there.
Right.
I could help a little bit with that if you want. It
Okay.
certainly would be helpful. I did, not my area of expertise either, but I did email Ameren about that because I remember the question coming up last time as well. And she pointed me to a couple of other examples, and I'll just read you from her email that might help perhaps explain a little bit of what the rationale was. Although she did say this exact question has come up before. It says the appoint employee staff is not unusual, but lately it's prompted similar questions. I recall this happening last year with the State Ethics Commission about whether this means the entity can just start hiring people without funding approval. But I don't know that I've heard anything about using the grant provision, also not unusual to hire staff and circumvent the GA's budget process. So that was an interesting point that came up as well. I would say neither of these provisions is essential, but the appointment language is to make it clear that the director has the ability to decide whether more staff is necessary as opposed to the governor or the Secretary of Administration. The grant language is to authorize the office to receive grants, but it's not required included in all the entities. It just sort of depends on the nature of the work and what you prefer. She did mention, just to be helpful to know, there are a couple of examples of each, just so you should know. The first one, the one that has both, is the Commission on Women, which has the powers of the commission shall include to maintain an office and hire employees as necessary to carry out its duties, to accept and solicit funds, including any gifts, donations, grants, or bequests, or any federal funds or any commission-related purpose. There's also the Fremont Care Board. I believe that's
So
what it is.
what we're saying is when that allows them to hire as necessary, it's contradicted by the appropriations power generally. In that they have to come and ask the positions to be created, and then the appropriations have to flow to staff those positions.
I think that's right. Maybe I would say rather than contradict, but subject to.
Subject to.
Yeah.
Right, so there's an implicit other step that needs to happen.
Right.
I still think it's,
I would take it out.
yeah.
I just
Why
think
do you
that,
need it?
because if there's already 3 employees assigned in the back, and if they need more, they're gonna have to come and put it in their next year's budget.
Right, so it's just it just creates confusion.
Yeah.
It doesn't do it.
Misleading.
I would just take it out. Shall have general charge of the division, which certainly includes saying, oh, we need to have 2 more people and we'll go ask for them.
Yeah, you could put them together and say the director shall have general charge of the division, comma, and may apply for grant funding if available.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
Don't go too far. I should have worked, Chair. I'm not real thrilled about this bill to begin with, but I don't understand the director may apply for grant funding to advance or support any responsibility within the division's jurisdiction. I am confused as to whether or not that is actually going to be done with the supervision of joint fiscal, or is this entity out there kind of ad hoc applying for funding on their own?
I think that they can apply for it, but they have to have the approval of joint fiscal committee to accept it. I think that's the way,
That's the way. it
that's the
works.
way it generally works with grants.
Is
They
this
can
an,
apply for it.
is this an independent agency similar to Secretary of State's office, the
No.
auditors?
This is under the administration, under the Secretary of Administration. It's the Office of Racial
They would
Equity.
need to get approval for a
Right.
grant from the Secretary of Administration.
Right, and then it has to go through joint fiscal
Right.
committee
Yeah.
to, yeah, so, I mean, that's in, I think that's implied with any administrative grant. I don't think you have to put it in there.
But we should be clear, because there was that original argument about whether this should be an entirely independent
Right.
group, and now it's been put under the agency of administration, which implies a lot, but I don't know that that's necessarily clear to the people who are pushing the bill, you know? So we need to be clear in the language about the powers and duties and who's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I think that you would have to do that with any division director then, anytime you did something and there are okay, I mean, I
No,
don't.
I think your analysis of it is exactly right, that the way I'm reading this is that it sits in the agency administration. It's an office that would need approval
Right.
from higher up, and that all flows. That's why I would get rid of this appointed employees as necessary.
Right,
But just saying that as it was discussed in the House, they were at least talking about having it be independent or semi-independent. So as we go through, I think we should just be looking for that and clear that we're not talking about a freestanding arm of government. But
right, I mean, I think that's pretty clear in the way it's
Okay.
written. It's under the Office of Racial Equity, which is part of the administration.
Yeah.
But I don't, if we need to put something in there about looking for grants using the specified procedure for, I don't know how you want to do that. Doesn't make any difference to me, because I think that that's the way it would happen anyway.
Yeah.
So what do you need in there with regard to two?
Two,
Number two, what do you want to?
I don't care, I don't think it needs anything, but
Because it would automatically have to go through JFO.
yeah,
So two is okay.
no, not JFO, JFC.
Right.
So that's okay?
I think it's fine.
I think I agree with that, and I would also, from a drafting perspective, would hesitate to add that specificity, because there are a number of other boards that use very similar language, and if you put that here, I didn't put it there, might someone say, oh, look, these guys don't have to go through this whole committee because you had it here but not there.
Right, yeah, I think that,
So you're saying it's okay the way it is?
I believe so.
Well, I guess just make it clear that the executive director of the Division of Racial Equity shall oversee the Division of Racial Justice.
well, I think that's clear, because the director is defined as the director.
No, we
of
changed
racial
that language. We-
Yeah,
we
it will say
proposed-
executive, yeah.
equity. Oh, it's executive director, yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
executive director of racial equity shall oversee the Division of Racial Justice Statistics. Now, the rest of it becomes okay.
You want to add of the racial equity, okay.
Under E.
Under E,
Yeah,
just
yeah, I
add
got it, good.
the executive director of racial equity,
No, Office of Racial Equity,
office of racial equity.
Yeah.
Shall oversee the Division of Racial Justice Statistics.
okay.
I don't know why there's a second division there, by the way.
What do you mean a second?
Oh, division established and subjected
Oh,
to
yeah.
this. Now, why is there another division?
You mean in parentheses there?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand that either.
I think that's just because, like, because then each other time, you don't have to say Division of Racial Justice Statistics every time, you just say division.
Oh,
So
it's
kind
like,
of a.
Okay.
you use
Short
an
version.
acronym for.
Yes, same idea.
Yeah, got it.
Okay.
Wouldn't you usually say the division?
I defer to yourself and the profers on that. I sort of have to choose my battles.
Well, on it too, it says
You know,
division jurisdiction,
like,
not division.
you remember, Bernie Mayo?
Yeah.
Bernie or Mayo, he was in health and welfare with me, and one day he was correcting the language, and he said, I am a grammarian, and you know the definition of a grammarian is a useless drudge.
All right, moving right along.
Although I don't think you're a useless drudge.
Useful.
Okay, so on page 3, we want to change that, right, on the top. So it says all identified state and local government agencies and departments as identified in whatever that is farther on.
Yep.
Yeah,
Wait a minute, so-
well, on page 3, the
Oh.
top,
Right, okay.
on number 1.
Okay.
Because here it says all state and local agencies and departments, and then further on it says that they will identify which divisions, I don't know.
The
where
very
that is.
top of page 5, line 1, the very first line on the top
Yes.
of page 5.
Yeah,
So that's what you would cross-reference.
yeah,
I'm remembering now through the advisory council that I
yeah,
have a problem with.
the way that's, I tried to do an organizational chart on that, it was impossible.
Well, I'm just wondering, as opposed to creating is it all right, Mr. Chair, to jump? to that?
Yeah.
Instead of creating this big new advisory council, why we aren't just referencing RDAP there as an advisory body for them? And if RDAP is, if their testimony is that they're already have enough work, we could add a couple of members to RDAP, as opposed to every time we create something like this, creating a big advisory board. And as I said before, the people that are laid out here don't have experience or expertise with statistics. So I don't know, what they can provide by way of advice, except the policy directions that you might derive from the advice. But that's going to be for the legislature anyway.
I think you're right, and RDAP has a lot of the same members on it, so,
Yeah.
and that is, what does RDAP stand for?
Racial
Statistics and,
disparities.
Racial disparities in the criminal and juvenile
Advisory.
justice advisory.
yeah, it seems to me.
We should
perfect
probably hear from Aton.
Yeah,
To see if they want to be the advisory body.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We should schedule him next week, Peggy,
Yep.
along with Mark Hughes.
Is on
and
oh,
Susan.
yeah, Susanna too, okay.
Page 4. Division may adopt procedural and substantive rules. I highlighted the word may.
Yeah, shall.
Yeah. That's what I said.
I think it's shall.
It used to be, it used to be something else.
It was shall, as I mentioned, that is they had that long debate in the House too, so I think there's obviously rationale for changing it back to shall, if that's what you want. There's definitely,
They decided May over there.
ultimately,
After
that's
a
where they
big fight.
landed. Yeah,
I would go with shall unless government operations, Senate government operations feels it should be may.
We'll look at that. So if we're gonna have Aton come in here and talk about RDAP as the appropriate one, then do we want to also have him come to have us to look at the appropriate oversight committee? Okay,
That would be helpful. I mean,
sure, yeah, I
I
could
mean,
do
you can
that.
get the you get it one place or the other or both.
Yeah, okay.
So on page 4, under data governance, it says data collection and consultation with, and then it lists both RDAP and this new
Mhm.
panel to be created. The division shall establish the data. So it's already contemplated going to RDAP for some advice. And why you'd have 25 people in the room if you had both those councils, with none of them having expertise in statistics.
Although RDAP does have some.
Oh, then they make even more sense then.
Well, I think the plan hopefully is to hire some people who are statisticians to be able to sort through the information.
Yeah, there are 3 people
What does
here.
it mean? I mean, I can get statistics and it means one thing to me, it may mean a completely different thing to the person next to me. Using an example of the information provided by the Justice Center on racial disparities in the criminal justice system in terms of black and white people arrested for drug crimes. And we had, and one of the things the Justice Center found was that these people had Vermont addresses by and large, that the idea that they didn't was, a falsehood. Then the person sitting, well, he was sitting next to me because we were remote, but a person said, yeah, but those are temporary addresses. So he's looking at statistics in one way and I'm looking at them in a different way.
Yeah.
And that's what Ruth, not Ruth, Norma Hardy, who is our police chief in Brattleboro.
Thank you for,
Yeah, she's looking at that. She said she's getting into the detail of not only permanent versus temporary addresses, but times of day and economic status of the people, because she said she doesn't believe that statistic in Brattleboro. And she's our police chief.
Can I ask still on the relationship here, with regard to the former Max Schluter shop, that's the Karen Gannett, is it Karen Gannett? I can't remember.
yeah, Karen Gannett.
Does the state pay for that? Do they like have a grant or what is,
I
how do
believe
they
the
get paid?
state provides some grant money.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it's everything. I think they get money other sources.
I see,
Are they affiliated with Dartmouth now?
No, I think they're affiliated with the university.
but I mean,
It's actually, I think it's, I don't know what the title is, but it's Norwich University. Is in the title.
okay, so we're using that center now.
Huh?
We are using that data place presently, is that correct?
Some cases, yes, but in the case of the racial disparities, we use information from UVM and we've used information from the Justice Center. And we've used probably other groups, and we used information from them that I can think of off the top of my head. All the stop data came from the UVM study.
I think this is a good thing, and it certainly is better than what was originally proposed a couple of years ago, which was to set up this whole big bureaucracy outside of state government. And this makes sense. You're hiring a couple people who are the technical data analysts to look at the data and collect it, and make sure that it's, and there's a contract with ADS to help them set it up.
Unfortunately, we need to get to the floor, and so we need